Okay, I think we will get started. So welcome everyone to our second of a large number of National Training Workshops virtual sessions. Today we are doing Worksite Assessment Networking. So if you have not already done so, please mute your microphone. I know that Abby will be asking people to go ahead and unmute at different times to have some discussions, but if in between you can keep your microphone muted to alleviate background noise. If you need closed captioning, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions during the presentation and it isn't a time to speak, feel free to type things into the chat box and I will monitor that for Abby and we will try to answer them as time allows. We are recording this session, so it will be available at a later date on the National Agrability website on the NTW tab. So I'm going to introduce Abby. Abby Speckman is the project assistant for Agrability for Pennsylvanians. She provides worksite evaluation and recommendations to farmers and agricultural workers who have disabilities or long-term health conditions. She has a degree in agriculture and extension education from Penn State and began working with Agrability in 2015. She is primarily responsible for all client services for the Agrability Pennsylvania project. So Abby, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Tess. I am going to share my screen here, so hang on just a minute. All right, so today's session is on a worksite assessment networking, and I am very sad that we are not meeting in person because the idea of this session is really for everyone to network and get to know each other and have some really good conversations about providing worksite assessments. So we will try to be as interactive as we can in this virtual setting. So I do want to make sure that everyone is unmuting to talk when I have the different prompts. Just make sure, like Tess said, that you mute when you're not talking so we minimize background noise. And you can also use the chat box to interact as well. I do want to start off with 3 poll questions. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll questions and give you a little bit of time to respond to those poll questions, and then we'll get started. Looks like we still have a good number of people to respond yet, so I'll give it just a little bit longer. So if you've not responded to the poll, please go ahead and respond to the poll, and then I'll close it and share the responses so that we can see a little bit more about our audience today. All right, I'm going to assume that those who haven't answered yet are not able to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And hopefully you can see the pulled results there. It looks like we do have a good number of folks who are providing worksite assessments, but a lot who are not. I was actually hoping to see that more people were able to provide in-person assessments, but it looks like there's still a significant number who are not able to, and we're actually going to talk about that in a little bit as far as barriers that you're facing with providing in-person assessments. But I'm also interested to see how the virtual assessments have been going, because I see we have quite a few people who are doing virtual assessments. So let me close this. All right, so I do want to start by doing some introductions. However, I do want to limit the introductions to individuals who are currently providing worksite assessments, so that we can kind of get an idea of who within Agrability is providing worksite assessments. So in a minute, if you are providing worksite assessments, you can go ahead and unmute and share a brief introduction. We'll see how this goes. If it gets to be too confusing, I will stop that. But again, I want this to be interactive. So for those of you who are providing assessments, if you could just share your name, your project affiliation, and then an uncommon piece of assistive technology you've recommended in the past year. We'll go with that and see, like I said, we'll see how this goes. But I'll start off. My name, again, is Abby Spackman. I'm with Agrability in Pennsylvania. And I wouldn't say I've recommended anything super uncommon, but something unique for me was recommending a ride-on overland cart for a sheep producer. So we will open this up for those of you who want to go ahead and do an introduction.
Hi, my name is Kathy Smith. I am from New York State Center for Agricultural Medicine and Health in Cooperstown, New York. And Abby and I have been emailing back and forth. Hi, Abby, nice to see you.
Hi.
So I have done, I'm only been a year into this job. I have done 3 on-site visits of farm assessments. I have not found them easy. Someone turned me on to a form that was on, I think, Agrability's website. It's very lengthy, so I've been using that. I sent it into the New York State Department of Education, and they just were totally amazed and have never seen it before. And it just seems like I did a lot of work for what they don't even need. But anyways, that's a different story. The most interesting thing that I've requested, well, that's my problem. I don't know what to request, so I don't really have a good answer for you, Abby. Sorry.
That's all right. Well, hopefully we'll be able to help you out with that.
Great.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. My name's Emily Freidenberg. I work for the Nebraska Agrability Project. I've been with Agrability about 6 years, and I do most of the rural assessments for our farmers and ranchers here in Nebraska. In the last year, I think the most uncommon piece of assistive technology that I have actually recommended was a video system, so that one of our clients and we could actually video chat back and forth due to the pandemic, something I never would have recommended in the past. Something else that we've recommended just for assistive technology that's not so uncommon here in Nebraska, but is a cattle working chute that we've requested. So.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mason with the UGA Agrability. I'm in Tipton, Georgia. We're still out doing assessments right now. We had a little break in it, but we've kind of got back out, and very limited interaction with clients, staying, remaining socially distanced from them while we're there. I guess probably the most uncommon as far as for our project is this year we did install auto steer GPS on a couple tractors and cotton picker for a client here in South Georgia. It was the first time we've done anything like that through our vocational rehab services. And so, kind of unique. He was had a stroke, so he had no use of the right side of his body. So, running equipment and steering at the same time was a pretty big challenge. So we just got that in there so he didn't have to worry about steering.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Tom Youngman from Vermont Center for Independent Living, and I've been with the Agrability Project for maybe 12 years now. I am doing on-site assessments using all the precautions. My recent thing that I worked on was a farmer with MS out of a wheelchair was able to get him a lift truck that he could transfer into, lift himself up into the driver's seat, drive out to the field, get out of the truck into the lift, and get up on a piece of equipment. It's like 5 different pieces of equipment he used, and it turned out very successfully. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
This is Mike Lewis from University of Kentucky out of Cooperative Extension Services at University of Kentucky. I guess my most interesting use, I'll say use of technology. How about that? I had to coordinate a site visit early on during the onset of the pandemic when we weren't allowed to visit with an Amish farmer. So I had to creatively work amongst the neighborhood to find someone local with a camera that could go over to the Amish to do some recording for me so that we could do the site assessment.
That's great.
Hey, I'm Garland. I'm with Agrability Virginia. I work out of Virginia Tech, but our program is a partnership between Virginia Tech, Virginia State University, and Easter Seals. And I guess an uncommon piece of assistive technology that I've recommended this year was a self-propelled wheelbarrow. So, yeah.
Neat. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mackenzie Thomas. I'm with Texas Agrability with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, and we've done a few assessments. I had to join virtually because they were in the Panhandle. It's about 10, 11 hours driving distance away from where we are. But we had a couple people on site, and then myself and the OT joined virtually. And one of the things we recommended for one of those individuals, we are working with the local university's engineering department and looking at access to his horse. So they're looking at ways to adapt a saddle for him.
That's great. Thank you.
Hey, this is Mason again. My coworker Kyle in Athens is kind of tied up and couldn't unmute himself, but he asked me just to make an introduction as well. He's doing site visits for North Georgia, and he's typing me a message right now to tell anything else. But he's been with us since full time since 2019. Was a student worker with us for a while he was still in college. One thing he's working on actually right now is we're looking at a way to cut net wrap.
Okay.
For a farmer who's paralyzed so that he doesn't have to get out of the tractor while he feeds. So
Nice. Nice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Randall Bagley, and I am the program coordinator for Agrability of Utah. I've held this position for almost 2 years. One thing that we have done is one of our facilitators recommended and was able to obtain a grabulator. And what that is a piece of equipment that fits on the front of a tractor or a skid steer. It's able to pick up small bales of hay. It then is able to lift it up and put it up on a truck. So this was a very beneficial piece of equipment for this farmer who was able to help.
Nice. All right, well, I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to do an introduction yet. If you didn't have a chance to do an introduction, or if you are not providing assessments but still want to do an introduction, you can type into the chat box. Unfortunately, we're not able to swap business cards, but if you do want to share your contact information, you are definitely welcome to type that into the chat box. And
Hey,
for
Abby, this
anyone-
is
oh yeah,
this
go
is
ahead.
Ned.
Yep.
Sorry, I jumped on here a little bit late,
That's
but
all
I'm
right.
Ned Stoller. I'm the assistant technology professional for Michigan Agrability, and I've been doing farm assessments here in Michigan since 2003. Something that it seems like we're constantly working on is the perfect fold down step so that you can get a low enough step without ripping it off. And it
Yes.
seems like it's just an ongoing effort to come up with something that works really good every time. And but it's definitely a continuous need. So that's what I did. One this year that's been more successful than before, and I made instructions for how to copy it. It's on instructables.com. If anybody else has ever looked at Instructables, it's just a website where people invent things and give instructions how to make it. So
Awesome, thank you, Ned. Is there anyone else that joined us late who provides worksite assessments that would like to do an introduction?
Hey, this is Ketra from Maine Agrability. I work for the nonprofit disability organization Alpha One, and we've had some folks that have been on wait lists for funding through an independent living grant that have all come to the top of the list in the last couple of months. So it's been fun helping them spend their play money, I guess you could say. But one couple of the female in the couple has a MS, and so fatigue is an issue, and her husband has multiple musculoskeletal issues, and so they were looking at modifications to their tractor, kind of standard equipment, but just things that will help them manage their energy levels better. So a plastic mulch layer, a 3-point seeder, and a rototiller attachment will all be helpful for them in helping to manage their energy levels.
Nice, thank you. All right, I think we will go ahead and move on, but like I said, if you didn't have a chance to introduce yourself, you can type that into the chat box. I'm really hoping that we'll have some good discussions today. I certainly don't want to be the only one talking. So as we go through, again, feel free to either unmute and share or type into the chat box. I see there are already some good interactions going on there. But to start with, and we kind of covered a little bit of this in the poll, but I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about whether or not you're able to conduct on-site assessments. And if so, what are some of the changes you've made to ensure safety? And some of them are the obvious, social distancing, but if there's anything unique or specific that you've done that you would want to share with the group, that would be great. Thankfully, Pennsylvania is able to do our on-site assessments in person, of course, with safety measures, but thankfully we've been able to get back to doing that because just trying to do it virtually is a challenge, as I'm sure you have all faced. And if you are doing virtual assessments, feel free to share, how you're doing that and what some of the benefits and challenges are that you have faced. And if nobody wants to share, I'll start calling on people.
This is Emily. I think the hardest part about doing things virtually, especially here in Nebraska, was rural connectivity. We get to a certain part in the state and even cell phones don't work. So even if they had a smart cell phone, they were spotty areas, and so they couldn't get the full reception they need, and so video and their voice would be cutting out. And a lot of them don't spend the money to have internet at their house for those same purposes. It's in and out. And so that was probably the most difficult for us, I think, when we tried to do a lot of virtual based things. But also, you know, when you're out on a farm visit, you're looking here and you're looking there, and you're getting ideas of how that farmer moves and how he gains access to those pieces of equipment, or she gains access to those pieces of equipment. And I feel like we lost a lot because of that. You couldn't see what they were really doing. And so it made it more difficult when recommending different pieces of assistive technology. And that was almost like a barrier, like a communication barrier, because you couldn't see it. And that's something that we needed to figure out on our own, how to do that better. And I don't know that we necessarily ever came up with a solution.
This is Kyle Haney from Georgia Agrability. When we wear masks while we go out on on-site assessments currently, but if the farmer has a hearing impairment, we carry disposable face shields with us that we can put on easily. So that way, if they need to be reading our lips at all, and we're outside the whole time, but that it's just an additional thing that we carry with us in case a mask is not appropriate at that time.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Abby, in the chat box, Garland Mason said that in Virginia, they are able to do on-site assessments outdoors with masks and social distancing.
All right, thank you.
And Elizabeth also shared for deaf and hearing impaired, there are also masks that are see-through.
Okay, yeah, great.
This is Emily again from Nebraska. Something I forgot to mention is we are finally getting back out to clients and going to the farms, and we're supposed to do all outdoor based, but right now it's in negative 14 degrees here in Nebraska. So it's not a lot of fun to go outside and stand and do a farm visit. We've been trying to make do with a little shop talk if we can when we're out there, but again, it's just keeping those social measures. And again, it's on a client by client basis, depending on their disability. Anyone that has a severe lung condition or anything along those lines, we're still not seeing in person.
Yeah, that's actually excellent to point out, the taking it client by client, which we have done as well. And you know, many of them are comfortable with us coming and some are not. And some of that we leave up to them. And then some of it is, you know, our judgment as well. So that's an excellent point, but it has to be based on the individual. Has anyone...
I've done some virtual visits that have worked good when the farmer has good connectivity and is comfortable with using his phone. And it was actually a very productive meeting. It worked really good. And then there's others that the farmer's eyes glaze over and like, no way, it's not going to happen. Or you can miss things, definitely. So in Michigan, we've been able to do the on-site visits. Once again, just careful to not get in vehicles with people and wearing masks if we have to be close together.
Mhm. That's great. I was actually just about to ask if anyone had done a virtual assessment successfully. So that's good to hear that it can be done.
We used a video call with our phones, so it was pretty nimble and easy for him to carry his phone around and show me things.
Great.
He actually did it himself. Probably would have been helpful if someone else was following along, but it did work.
Yeah, I don't think I would have been able. This is Mike Lewis from University of Kentucky. I don't think that I would have been able to conduct the site assessment with the Amish gentleman had there not been someone else holding the camera. It would have been really hard to see and give directions at the same time. So it's critical for me to have a second body there holding the camera as we were reviewing the actions and operations taking place on the farm.
This is Mackenzie from Texas again. We did a kind of half virtual, half on-site. Two of our staff went on-site, and then myself and the occupational therapist had to join virtually. So it worked pretty well. The individuals had Wi-Fi at their home. They were in a really rural part of the state. So, you know, when we went outside, it got a little spotty and we did have to use like cell phone service. And when they went out to the actual fields and stuff, the individuals in person, the connectivity wasn't good enough. So it's good to have someone there in person to be able to take pictures because, you know, it was kind of spotty as we got further out on their operation. But for the parts indoors and around the house, having someone there to film them transfer in and out of their equipment, that was really helpful.
Abby, John Horn had a question. He said, great idea on the video. Would you guys recommend making videos of farming in action? I find it hard to actually know what I would need to assist, and it doesn't stay in the forefront when speaking to my team.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to know a little bit more about the situation and what type of videos they're looking for. We haven't actually done anything like that, so if anyone else wants to jump in, they are welcome to, but something that our team has talked about is if we could create a video demonstrating, you know, if we're virtually asking someone to help us assess their tractor, can we create a video and send to them showing, you know, how they can help us assess their tractor, but we haven't actually done that. I don't know if that's what they're looking for or more just general agricultural videos. All right, does anybody want to add anything else on virtual or in-person assessments before we move on to the next question?
I wonder if John Horn, are you the one doing site visits, but not necessarily the one making recommendations? So you're thinking about taking video to show to other people who then could research technology for you? I know even for myself, I take lots of video clips when I'm out at the farm, watching somebody, just their range of motion and their gait, how they walk, the tasks that they need to do. So I definitely use video a lot.
We have another question in the box. This is from Avery Olson. She says, hello, I'm an occupational therapy doctoral student at the University of Mary. I am completing my capstone on aging on the farm. One thing I'm curious about is whether or not you include the individual and their family members while assessing. If so, has there been challenges or successes?
So yes, the individual themselves is included, depending on, at least for Pennsylvania, and other people can add, depending on the situation. Others, such as family members, caregivers, or employees may also be involved, but we take that on a case-by-case basis. Having others included, especially when it's a spouse, can be challenging, but it can also be beneficial. But again, we, at least in Pennsylvania, take that case by case.
This is Emily from Nebraska. We ask that family members or those that work alongside the farmer or the rancher be there as much as possible when we are doing it, because they see a different perspective as well. It gives us an idea from their hindsight too, what the farmer rancher is, their biggest limitations are, because the farmer or rancher may not consider something a limitation as well. And so then when we talk those things through. So I guess from my personal experiences, I enjoy having a family member or an employee there because it does give me a better background about that person.
All right, we are going to go ahead and move on. But again, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Then the next kind of discussion question I had was, do you give your client or customer homework or action items before leaving the farm or before ending your virtual assessment? If so, how do you provide this information and how do you follow up?
Hey, this is Ketra. I haven't been doing any on-site assessments here in Maine, but when we were, we actually made a carbon copy document, thinking back to old school, where we would write down sort of a list of to-dos, both for the farmer and for ourselves. And then we'd tear it off and leave one copy with the farmer, and we'd take one back with us to the office.
This is Candy Leathers. I would say that homework assignments before COVID, with COVID, and after COVID are a part of our assessment process. And they could look lots of different ways, but a lot of action items might be on maybe securing information about a piece of equipment, all the way to checking with a local resource or applying for another service provider. And so those are discussed at time of site visit. And then in my after site visit letter, the goal is always to have that done within 10 days or so from when I've seen that individual. They'll be listed, action steps for that person, and then the action steps for myself, for my accountability of what I committed to doing or not doing are listed in that. And then those allow me to plug into my calendar, and then to check back with the client about, did they get that done, or have they learned that information? Or same for myself, I contacted this place and this is what they told me, to go back and forth. I think those are real helpful in engagement. And sometimes when that person doesn't follow through with any homework or assignments or whatever, that's a good conversation about whether they're really ready now, maybe to make modifications or changes, or what their availability to their rehabilitation process is at that time. And it may not be a real good time, for that person when we're doing it. And it just allows me to kind of just keep track of that and circle back around maybe when it might be better. So I think their action items and homework are super helpful to engage your client, but not to where they intimidate or become overwhelming. I think those case by case are weighed of what maybe they can engage in and what they can't.
Yeah, definitely some great great points there. Thank you.
So Brittany shared in the chat, I work for VR Indiana. We have a provider do the on-site evaluations, but when I assign quotes homework for participants, I usually text or email the assignment.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we've definitely found, like Candy shared, that it can be very telling if you give the client homework, whether or not they follow through. It can be very telling on how other things are going to go as well.
This is Emily from Nebraska. I have to agree with Abby and Candy on that. Sometimes the follow through just isn't there. And a lot of the times I almost wonder if it's originally because of they are so overwhelmed with everything going on and the different services providers all trying to come together for one, I guess, whole intervention. With us here in Nebraska, we work closely with Nebraska Voc Rehab. And so one of the things I do ask our clients to do, part of our agreement with Voc Rehab is that we will find the quotes on the assistive technology that we recommend. And so depending on the cost of the quotes, that means how many quotes I have to get per item. So I ask the clients usually in that time to help me look for clients or look for vendors in their area that would be willing to get us a quote, mainly for the reason that clients asking for a quote from a vendor in their area tend to have a better time of getting a better deal than if I call myself. If they actually talk to the person that's struggling, knowing what their limitations are and using that local vendor, I seem to usually have better success with getting a deal out of those vendors instead of just a tried and true number across the basis. So, and then we also have them take a survey for us while we're out there.
That's great. Thank you, Emily.
This is Candy again. This is a comment off of your specific questions you're asking, but I too used to gather all the bids and estimates for quotes, whatever you want to call them, for DVR, until I started running into vendors that wouldn't stop taking my phone calls because I was going to ask for them to submit a bid or something for me so that I could put it in a report. And the feedback I got was, I'm tired of doing that, and then I never hear from Voc Rehab. That happened quite a bit, so we went back to Voc Rehab, and we don't do that. I do give an MSRP. I give an estimate of approximate estimate, but I no longer just for our project specifically gather the bid until if the counselor at time when they're really moving forward needs my help, then absolutely we'll work with the vendor and the client and anybody to try to get that bid. But what we were finding is we were losing some credibility with vendors because we were asking for that information. They were taking the time to fill those out and send them. And, we started putting with, these are only good for 30 days. And then it would be like 9 months or a year before the counselor might be able to move forward with that activity. So I kind of stopped doing that because it's a lot of work to gather that on all involved. And Voc Rehab was receptive to that they wanted the ballpark price, but they weren't asking for the bids. That's a little off target, but I just think that saved me an awful lot of work waiting, going back and forth with vendors to get bids and stuff like that. I don't do that until truly almost where they're ready to pull the trigger, and then I can help if possible.
So Candy, this is Emily again. So as a part of that, do you you line up everything that the client would need? So say it's a side-by-side and they have a serious spinal cord injury that's affected by hot and cold weather. Do you write that in your report then, in your MSRP or whatever you were calling it, that you would put that you need them to have a side-by-side utility vehicle that has the option for heating and air for
Yeah,
VR to gather that quote then? Because I don't know that if we did that here in the state of Nebraska, they would even know what we're talking about.
You know, I do. I put in the report, the what the work task is that they're having difficulty doing, what the product or accommodation might be, why it's useful, and then I will put I'll put the basic price for the UTV, the price with a aftermarket cab on it, maybe if they have a UTV, or a new one with the UTV, and give them a lot of strong rationale for that. And then always put a little star down there that says, these are estimates and we can work with you on getting a bid at the time or something along that line. So yeah, in my reports probably get kind of lengthy, although Voc Rehab hasn't said that they don't mind that. They feel that I'm giving them the information they're needing to make decisions. So I'm fortunate that if I put in the recommendation for like a cab and it's disability related, like they have multiple sclerosis or something like that, and are really impacted by cold, I haven't had any pushback from that being an acceptable recommendation. What I do have problems sometimes is what I recommend, it may not be exactly the specs that they get, and that has caused some problems on some things where I'll recommend a certain make, model, type, something along that line with rationale, and then they'll get something different, usually because it's lower cost, but it doesn't meet the specific need we were identifying. So then it's going to cause a, outcome problem for us if they don't get that. So I think it's important to, I try to keep on top of that and follow and making sure a lot of communication going back between client, counselor, vendor, and myself about what they're getting and why I want them to get that. But I would say we're pretty gosh darn lucky and fortunate that it usually does go well. Did I answer that, Emily? I hope I did.
Yes, thank you so much, Candy. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually good information. And I've run into the situation where I recommend a specific make and model because of a disability related concern or a specific need. And VR does not like when we recommend a specific make and model and then they choose something else and it doesn't have that specific accommodation. So it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of times it would be like the size or stature of the client that I'm working with, and I want a bigger pan, for their feet or different the measurement between the steering wheel and their maybe big tummy or something like that of what's going to be good for that person. So I want a Polaris Ranger over a mule and more whistles or bells. So sometimes it'll get pretty lengthy in the reason. For me personally, if I talk about safety, I'm more successful with safety than any other rationale in working with Voc Rehab. That it's a safety related issue, even more that it's an accommodation that's necessary to the disability. I just verbiage that you try to use that seems to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. This is all great sharing, and I want to continue with that. So I just want to open it up. If there is anything that anybody wants to share that you've learned, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the past year, but if there's something that you've learned recently that had a big impact on how you conduct your worksite assessments or a change that you've made.
This is Mason in Georgia. One thing that we really need to stress, especially right now, is being honest with expectations to clients. For a while there, our VR was actually very, 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 very good with funding, and we were getting a lot of stuff funded, but there's been a lot of budget cuts in the past year. So just being straightforward with clients about expectations, and yeah, they may be neighbor to somebody we worked with in the past, and they see new UTV over there and a new truck lift or whatever, but that may not be the case this go around because of the environment that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
it's kind of sad that I have to learn this lesson again. This is Ned from Michigan. And it's really basic for us as service providers, but it's client confidentiality. And quite often one client learns about our services from another, from their neighbor. And so I got a call from a farmer who was next door neighbor to one of my other clients that I had done a lot of work with. Really great relationship with them. So I just assumed that this referral was from two neighbors having a conversation. And in the midst of my farm assessment, I talked about this guy's neighbor who I thought had made the referral. And it turned out they don't get along.
Oh no.
And it just seemed like something that was not a big deal. But then it was just like remind me of when I'm working with a client, just to be careful about talking about other clients, other people in the community, and just doing a good job with that part of it. So that's been a lesson I had to relearn this year.
Yeah, it's definitely a good reminder. And I know it can be hard, especially when we're there, you're trying to build relationships and be conversational, and that can sometimes get a little bit sticky or have those fine lines. And yeah, it can definitely be sticky because everybody knows everybody.
Something that along that lines that was really important in the last year and a half for me was having that release sign that I could use my photographs. Actually, it was really frustrating and scary for a little bit when we had a client get upset that something had been publicized or something. Along that, actually was CSU who had picked up on something we had done kind of after the fact. And I was so thankful that that release was in the file that that person had signed and said, and once they had forgotten that, and once they were reminded of that, they really had a turnaround on it. I just think it took them by surprise. And lots of lessons learned there. One, to make sure it was there, make sure it was current. Two, oversight maybe. We did not know that CSU was putting that story out. We didn't know. I think if we would have, so all that communication amongst other people, if we would have known, we would have alerted that family again to say, something's coming out. Just lots of things. So hopefully from that experience that was scary for a few days, thinking I might be in jail somewhere, with, Paul Jones looking at me, scorning me. I was so scared for a few days that after I got over that trauma, just to work smarter about making sure those things are current and talking to people and reminding, because there's so much at the first few site visits you have, there's so much that happens, that's on our in paperwork stuff that isn't as important to them as it was to me. So just a reminder, good lesson for all of us, kind of goes along with Ned's. It's just, you're supposed to do it, and sometimes it just can slip away in the big picture of things.
Yeah.
One thing we've kind of emphasized the last little while in Utah is that the farmer, once they get the equipment, must continue to farm and ranch. If they get it and they get a retire or they're going to sell their farm, VR can actually come in and repossess that and take that back. So we remind them that it is important that these are items that to be used while they're farming. Also that they're responsible for it. If a UTV tends to wear out after 10 years, VR is usually not going to replace that. They're going to make them sign a form saying that they are responsible for it. They are required to take care for it and start putting money away to replace it. Another thing, we had a person here who had a trailer that VR furnished for them, and it was damaged in a car accident, and he was and it was not insured, so he was required to pay for that. VR was not going to replace it again. So we just kind of emphasize those three things, that they required to take care of it, insure it, and that they should only be using it if they're farming.
All right, we're gonna move on to a game, sort of a game here in a minute, but does anybody else want to share anything that they've learned or anything that's went really well for you maybe in that during an assessment?
This is Mackenzie from Texas again. One thing that, because our state is so big, and with travel restrictions and all of that this year, our partnership with local, like for example, we had a couple assessments in the Panhandle of Texas. Like I said, it's about 10-hour drive from where we're located. So instead of, it would have been a lot easier to just take an ag engineer that we knew from our area and go do the assessment. But we actually partnered with a college that was more local to those farmers and ranchers. And so that allowed them to kind of have a relationship with them more locally. So they've been able to go out a couple times and do like follow-up things and make a plan for how they're going to adapt the equipment, and using students as part of their capstone project for some engineering classes. So while it was a little bit more coordination and legwork to connect with those people and build that relationship beforehand, it's been really helpful for us and the client, I think, in the long run, to have more local people working with them, because there's so many restrictions for travel right now.
I'm thankful that I live in a state where I can get anywhere in the state in 4 hours.
So this is Misty Rail. I'm from Alaska, and so travel's been an issue for us to get to our clients. Obviously, we have to fly everywhere to see them. We've been able to do some of our assessments through distance delivery, through video, but of course, having internet access is not a common thing to have outside of our main Anchorage, Fairbanks, some of our main cities. So I can feel your pain from Texas, not wanting to drive anywhere. I did want to share, we did have one person that we have been successful with VR this year, and runs a chicken farm, and we were able to use smart home equipment and found a smart home chicken coop door, and then use the eave door and window sensors. So they actually get a text message every time the door opens or closes to make sure that it did actually open and close and didn't freeze shut. So that was one of our wins for this year so far.
That's really cool. Neat. All right, I think we are going to go ahead and move on. If anyone I know this was scheduled until 2, so if you need to jump off at 2, that's fine, but we probably are going to go a little bit over because I want to make sure we continue good discussions. So if you can stick around longer, please do so. But we're going to do a little bit of I Spy, and feel free, anyone, jump in here and share. Even if you don't provide assessments, you can still jump in and share ideas that you might have. So our first I Spy is a gentleman who is raising meat rabbits. And I realize not all of you may be able to see the screen, but hopefully you can see the picture. But he's providing feed, water, and general care to over 80 rabbits twice a day. The individual has pretty limited mobility and back pain. The rabbit pens are currently suspended approximately 3 feet above the ground. And this individual is not eligible for VR, mainly because they don't view him as having enough income from this operation. So just based on what you know, obviously I know you'd like to know a lot more, but just based on the information that I've provided there and what you can see in the picture, what are some things that, you know, jump out to you as something that you would either recommend or change, or, you know, even if it's a question that you might ask, the idea is to kind of do a mini assessment and throw out some ideas to, you know, to kind of give, you know, newer people, you know, we've heard from Kathy earlier, you know, an idea of what some of the things are that we might do or look for. So feel free to jump in.
Hey, this is Mason from Georgia. I would consider first off how he's watering. You know, does he carrying a water hose in there? Is it across the floor? You said he has limited mobility. Is it a tripping hazard? You know, could there be some kind of reel mounted system on the ceiling that, you know, the water hose would hang from, that he could, you know, just grab and pull to each individual water and fill up? You know, things like that to keep the flooring clear.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even look at improving the flooring to a more solid structure.
Yeah.
Abby, Jean shared in the chat, possibly move height up so it limits bending, and then a connected water source.
Yes, definitely.
I think in addition to that, you could add some sort of food source that would be similar to like a water source, where you have something that's going to roll that food down to each of those pens.
Mm-hmm.
Also on feeding, I mean, I see he's got like the kind of automatic feeders that they, you know, kind of drops down as they're eating. But how is he getting the feed to them? Is he carrying it in 5-gallon buckets, or does he have some kind of cart that he can push along and just scoop it in or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
For picking up the manure, if there was maybe like a walk behind tractor with a scraper blade, or something that could, like a snowplow or something, reach over underneath and drag the manure over to the aisleway, so we wouldn't have to be bending and reaching. Maybe somehow drag it out of the barn, depending on how the doors are arranged, and just thinking about cleaning underneath the pens or having them lift up. I don't know if the rabbits are all gone at once, that the cages can be lifted right up and then the tractor drove in under and scooped it up, possibly.
Yeah, one thing that I think I struggle with during evaluations is keeping seasonality in mind. For example, when I did visit this individual, it was 90 degrees, but today it's 5 degrees. So that's a much different story there, with especially with the water. So keeping the weather in mind is sometimes I really have to remind myself to think about year-round things as well. And there's no right or wrong answer for this or solution. This is more just for discussion. So I do have, we'll move on here to another one. Again, just to kind of get ideas going. This individual here is breeding and raising sheep to sell for 4-H projects and meat production. He has low vision. His breeding ewes are kept in the barn or pen, or the barn pen here that's pictured, which if you can't see it, it's a very dark, poorly lit space. And then also he has them on pasture, and he farms alone. So what are some things that come to mind for this individual?
Something that we did here in Nebraska a while back for a cattle farmer that had low vision is we changed out a lot of his gates. So they were different types of materials, so that ideally if his eyes were having a really, really bad day and he was struggling, he would know by the feel of the gate, whether they were square, circular, large square, smaller circled panels, where he was at on the farm, as well as he was struggling to see how many and count how many were close. And so, especially when they were out on pasture, so he would identify them by bells. For different facilities on his farm, he had different radios and had different radio stations playing on all those different radios, again, so he could gain access and bearings on where he was located in case of a bad day.
That's great.
It'd be Jean shared in the chat just to improve the lighting. And then Ketra just shared wind chimes attached to different buildings with different chimes. And Elizabeth shared sometimes LED lighting is better.
Yeah, definitely lighting is important, and something that we've talked about that almost seems silly in a way, but can make a big difference, is cleaning existing lights, cleaning existing windows to improve the lighting that's already there. And then if that's not enough, adding additional lighting. One thing that this individual actually, we suggested and he already implemented, was using marking paint to mark his sheep in a variety of different ways. And this time of year, he's able to mark them with different colors so that he can easily identify ewe and lamb pairs, either from across the barn, across the pasture, or even writing ear tag numbers on their sides rather than having to try and read the small ear tags for records all of the time. And he found that is really helpful for him.
Jean shared use of video or smartphone to zoom in on areas that are far away. And then Ketra also shared meet with a low vision specialist to look at other needs.
All right, and one more scenario here. This is a beef farmer. He currently shovels or pushes the feed in towards his cattle multiple times per day. And if you can see the picture there, you can see exactly what he's doing. He has a traumatic brain injury, back pain, arthritis in his hands and shoulders, and difficulty gripping. He is working with VR. But what are some suggestions that you might make to him for, for this feeding scenario?
Abby, does he feed with a tractor and feeder wagon?
I believe that he was That's a good question. Now I'm trying to remember what.
No, you're fine. I was gonna say if he had a fence line bunk system, that would help to keep the feed like in the same area, so he wouldn't have to push it back up every day.
Yeah, definitely.
Everyone.
Oh, good.
Oh, sorry. One comment came in late for the last slide. It just says some VR offices have counselors specifically for individuals that are blind or visually impaired. And then one for this slide, mobility device with a brush or a scraper.
Maybe he could extend the roof a couple more feet to keep water and snow off of it to make it easier for him walking, keep the feed better too.
It looks like he's using a shovel to push that. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it kind of looks like a shovel.
Yep.
They do have snow shovels that are specifically for back, you know, to help with back stuff. I don't know if that would assist or not.
Yeah, that could be a low tech option. Yeah.
Yeah, Abby, this is Rod in Nebraska. I was just looking at this, and I think this guy, I've got a lawnmower with an angled blade on it that he could get a lot of good out of. To push it up there. That or a feed bunk.
Abby, Kathy had a question. Who does the work to install the lights or additions, etc.?
It really varies. It depends on whether or not they're being funded by VR. Our VR strongly prefers professional installation of everything. So if VR was making the purchase, we would have, you know, we would help find someone to professionally make those installations. If the farmer's purchasing them on their own, it would be up to them whether they install them, whether an employee installs them, or they hire someone to install them. And so the actual solution for this individual, he had a utility vehicle, and we were able to help him get a snow plow to put on the front of the utility vehicle that he could angle and push in the feed. The problems were he had to remove the piece of the roof so that the utility vehicle would fit under it. And then there's also a concrete edge that you might see there in the picture that we had to measure to make sure that we were getting the correct width of a plow, that edge would not be a problem. So it worked out well. We just had to make sure and take into consideration those sort of hidden problems. But that is what I had to share to kind of get conversations going. And I think we did have some pretty good conversations. I just want to, you know, for those of you who did stick around, if anybody wants to still add anything, we do have a few more minutes that you could add anything. And as I said before, if you want to put your contact information in the chat box, feel free to do so. And my contact information is on the screen. So I will pause for a few moments if anybody else wants to jump in and share anything to do with worksite assessments.
I just had this is Mason. I had a thought, Abby. You talked about the temperature. That's something that I rarely think about freezing because we so very rarely freeze down here where we're at to the point that you have to worry about things like that.
Yeah.
Abby, Kathy asks, is there a particular form that is used to do assessments?
Yes. National Agrability does have a form. I believe it's available online or in their worksite assessment handbook. However, I personally have modified that form to fit my needs and our particular state, like we were just talking about the weather and other factors that are important to us to include in the assessment. So we have created our own form, but there are forms available, and I believe they are on the NAP website.
Abby, there was a question from Kristen. Are you willing to share your form?
Send me an email. Whoever asked that, send me an email directly. I'm hesitant to share it only because, like I said, I tailored it very specifically to our needs. So I would be happy to talk to you about it. But I really strongly encourage everybody to take the NAP form and tailor it to your needs.
And Paul Jones did say, put the link to the National Agrability website, the resources for worksite assessment in the chat box.
Thank you, Paul.
Olin is with us.
And I also put a link for evaluation questions in the chat box. So if people would please, before they leave, click on that and answer some evaluation questions. That would be great, but please feel
All right, well, I think with that, we will wrap up unless anybody has something that they really, really want to add, but I just hope that next time we do this, we'll be in person somewhere.
all right. And Abby, I'm just going to have you stop sharing for a minute and I'm going to put up my final slide.
All right.
And just thanking everybody for joining us. Abby, thank you for presenting. Again, if you could follow the link in the chat box to answer some evaluation questions about today's session. We do have, obviously, every week we've got another session. So whatever the link you use today will work for every Tuesday session. Next week's session is 21 tools and strategies to work smarter, not harder, with Kelly Gagnon from Grit HQ, and that will start at 1 p.m. Eastern time, just like today. And if you have any, in general, questions about our Tuesday sessions, you can email me at tmckeil@goodwillfingerlakes.org. And then obviously Abby had her information up there if you want to contact Abby for specific questions about today. So I will leave this open to give people time to click the link. But other than that, I think we are all set. I'm going to stop my share. Abby, you were muted if you were saying something to the group.
Yeah, actually, I was asking you if you know, does the chat get saved anywhere?
I can save the chat.
Okay, if you could save it and send it to me, I would appreciate it.
I will, sure thing.
Thank you.